Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 41 with Tino and Aaron. What's up, Aaron?
Not much, a little bleary eyed last night of work for me. So
Nice.
eager to record and get some rest and knock out one more work night so I can get some sleep the next 2, 3 days.
Nice. This morning was reminded me of the knucklehead days of waking up late for school. If you see my voice or see my eyes, I literally just woke up and apologized to Aaron for being late to the pod, but here we are and ready to record. So today we're going to cover the our Fantrax League trade deadline recap. So obviously there's specific trades in our league, but I think value for value, they represent pretty good hypotheticals or way to gauge value on these players. If you own these players in a dynasty league, we're going to each do a prospect deep dive, and we'll talk about some series that we're looking forward to today and tomorrow, or some games today and tomorrow, and then open forum and cards if we have time. What's your coffee story for the week?
My coffee story is I broke out a piece of equipment, which I forgot how much I really like, and it was my mocha pot. Um, it's mocha spelled Mokka, not mocha like Mocha. It's a little confusing because in the coffee world, mocha is usually a drink, but it's a little stovetop brewer. Explain those maybe who've never seen one, but since you put the water in the bottom, the coffee's in the middle, put it on a heat source, which for me is gas. Um, and the heat, as it pushes the water through the coffee in the middle, the coffee is brewed at the top.
Mhm.
Um, it's called, it's called an espresso maker. Technically, for those in us in coffee, we know it doesn't create enough pressure to really do a true shot of espresso. However, it does make a really rich, full-bodied coffee. I usually cut mine with about 1/3 water. And it just makes a really strong, sweet cup of coffee. I brewed a cup over the weekend, last weekend, whatever that was. I immediately wrote it down. I was like, I want to share this because it's not an everyday cup of coffee because it's so strong and it's you have to hand wash all the parts and it's a little
Mhm.
bit more manual. However, it's when you have some time, I was reminded I need to get this out more often because I truly do enjoy it.
Awesome. It's fun to find a kind of rediscover a new toy sometimes. I did
Hmm.
that with AeroPress recently. I'm not a huge AeroPress fan. It's a little the yield is a little bit light in body for me, but amazing travel tool and camping tool and super fun. Also convenient with the Hario hand grinder. But yeah, it's always fun to kind of rediscover that. It's like Christmas again, sort of.
You'll have to send me your ideal ratio of what you do with your AeroPress because I can never quite find the sweet spot. I
Sure.
have one as well.
Sure.
I have all the supplies. I'd maybe try to break it out if you can give me some guidance of what you find success with.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, my story for the week is just that I was in a rush and stopped at the roastery and got a uh, what they call nitro cold brew. Um, I think it was a decent cold brew, but minus the nitro, and also had ice, which was a little bit strange to me. I think about nitro as a texture, right? Um, it's a style of production that not coffee production, but the way that you pour it, and that is common with it's a the texture of a Guinness essentially is what I guess the easiest way for people to relate to it. Or I think Hale's Cream Ale from Ballard in Seattle's another example, but they do it on ice, and so kind of kills the smoothness of the coffee. And I asked about how they brew it, and they use their blues blend, which is kind of predictably um, Central America, Asia, and Africa, without any real specifics. And then they said that typically blues is brewed at full city, but that this is that the stuff they use for cold brew is brewed a little past full city. So I assume they want a little bit more, a little darker roast for their cold brew. Anyways, wasn't bad. Wish it didn't have ice. I'll ask for no ice next time, and definitely might have been the reason for me not being able to sleep and then sleeping in. Now that I think about it, actually, it just came to me. So there's that. It was a cold brew experience. It was decent. I still haven't made my own cold brew this year.
I
I
mean,
think
either.
I think as I get older, I enjoy hot coffee in the morning more and more. If I start having a cigarette with that, please punch me out because then I'll be real old. But yeah, it was a again decent experience. Don't think I'll be ordering that again. If I do, it'll be without ice. Is what it is. Moving along. Let's start with the trade deadline. We did not share which specific trades we would talk about with each other, but I thought that we could review some of them and talk about what we saw for value on either side, and if we thought those trades were acceptable or not. I think it's a conversation that we have with others in our league, really in any league at any point in time, but it's a fun one to share on the pod. The first one I'd like to bring up is Balls Deep traded um, Beatty and Josh Rojas to Loaded Bowlers for Alec Thomas and Nolan Gorman. What was your first reaction to that trade? And do you think anybody won that particular trade?
No, I don't think anybody won the trade. Um, my first reaction was the owner who traded Gorman perceived that he valued him highly.
Mm-hmm.
So I was surprised to see him included in the move. It was also interesting that Alec Thomas had been involved in a trade with these two owners already this year.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a reversal. So that I thought was interesting as well. But I did not think that there was one side that got the better player or anything like that. One thing that's interesting is that Rojas has four positions that he's eligible at, and so I don't uh, I don't know that roster well enough to know if he's lacking versatility. But that might be something where he was maybe willing to give up. Gorman only has two, but that's still pretty good, second and third.
Mm-hmm.
So you still offer some versatility, but um, yeah, it's just interesting because to me, I don't know what you're better at prospects than I am. I know Beatty is supposed to have power, just maybe have as much raw as Gorman, maybe a little less strikeout, but similar type player. Whereas Alec Thomas is a straight outfielder and Rojas is a utility player.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. Three young players there. Beatty, Thomas, and Gorman. We probably haven't seen their ceilings yet. Whereas Rojas is really spiking a really good season this year.
Sure.
So interesting trade. I see it as pretty even.
I couple thoughts. The first one is, excuse me. The first one is that both teams are in contention, and I don't see maybe Nolan Gorman, but I don't, and maybe Rojas, but I don't really see any of those players truly impacting either team down the stretch. Uh, it looks like I'm just looking at the rosters quickly here. It looks like Loaded Bowlers is playing Beatty right now. And then I don't know. As far as the just value for value, um, I'm not a Gorman fan. I think he's gonna run 30% strikeout rates, and he'll be he's obviously power over hit just based on his skills. Um, each team I think has room for one, maybe two players of that profile, and if you can get it at second base and you don't mind not getting steals, I can understand it. His third base eligibility will probably go away next year, so you're looking at a strict second baseman. That was another thought for me was. Loaded Bowlers already had Ty France as his second baseman. So not he also had Jeff McNeil eligible there, so it was a little bit repetitive for him. Uh I haven't looked at Balls Deep yet. Not an Alec Thomas fan. I think at his peak, you're looking at probably a 15-15 or 18-18 type player. Too many ground balls. His ground ball rate is still extremely high. Beatty ran a 25% K rate in Double A before he was recalled, so there is some swing and miss to his profile. But I think Beatty ultimately proves to be the better or the best player in this trade. And the other interesting part for me is both of these teams probably are already under a keeper crunch. So if it was me, the loaded bowlers having traded two pretty good players for the best player is definitely the right play. Getting Beatty back in return. I'm not a huge Brett Beatty fan, but I think that was, if there was a slight lean for me, it would be towards the team that got Beatty back.
Hmm.
But not a fan of really of any of the four players myself. None of those four players were players that I've really inquired about in the past or would think about rostering over those on my team already. But that's just me. Anything else on that trade?
Yeah, I think what you said about Gorman is interesting. And third base eligibility going away because I think if that does happen, that might tip it. I know I might prefer Beatty
Mm-hmm.
because I think second, as we talked about in the preseason with their ranks, and I think is held, through the season, a second base is a lot deeper. So
Sure.
a lot more rotations there. It's easier to find people who have second base eligibility, whereas third base is, in my opinion, much shallower and a little bit harder to find a quality bat there. So
Right.
I would like that Beatty's going to keep that, whereas Gorman's going to lose it. But I do see them as pretty equal.
One other thing to add with this trade is the team that acquired Gorman and Alec Thomas really did not have a need for any of them. So Gorman, the team that acquired Gorman has currently Trey Turner at second and Jose Ramirez at third. And so there's really not a need there. And then with Alec Thomas, he already has Soto, Kyle Tucker, and Michael Harris, along with Josh Bell. So I think those are both backup pieces for him. For him, it sounds like more of a trade for the sake of making a trade and not necessarily to help his team in the moment. So interesting trade for sure, in my opinion. Next trade we're gonna cover is uh, Chico's bail bonds traded Elijah Green, Harold Ramirez, and Sam Mole to fastballs for Brady Singer, Michael Bush, and Diego Castillo. Initial thoughts.
Yeah, I mean the team that acquired Lance, no, he didn't get Lance Lynn, he got Singer. Um, so one of the things that I did for this exercise and shared on our league site was prompted by another owner. But I looked at what everyone did in sum, and the owner here who acquired Singer in this trade acquired five different pitchers. So in that context, I mean, he clearly was targeting pitching, and he was pretty vocal about that pre-deadline. He was looking for starters, and he was willing to trade. He had four outfield prospects of some quite renowned. So, um, yeah, I mean, I'm surprised, to see Elijah Green not return. Maybe someone with a little bit more track record. However, Brady Singer is having a nice season.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the market will bear what the market will bear. And I know he was um, shopping those outfielders, those outfield prospects really hard. And so if that's what he can get, like, it seems like a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
This is filling up Brady Singer's stuff on location. So his location plus is good. His pitching plus is average, and his stuff is below average. But he is having a good season. He's put together, I think, in the last couple months, without having his game logs up, which I can pull up. It seems, to my secondhand experience, he's having a nice season. What were your thoughts?
So first on Singer, I think I rostered him earlier in the year and got some good starts out of him before letting him go. But what I will say about him is that he is, if you watch him, I think his stuff is better than, what did you say his stuff plus was according to,
89.
89?
Yeah, league average starters around 95.
Yeah, I understood. This is one of those examples where I don't really believe in that model. I think that Singer has made some adjustments to his repertoire where he's throwing his change a lot more, and he's really learned to spot his two seam fastball. It's one of those two seamers that really does push the left hander off the plate, and he's able to bend it back in for a strike. He only has a 10% swinging strike rate, but he has a 30.8% CSW. So there's a lot of deception, I think, on his pitches, and his pitches look like balls but end up strikes for hitters. So again, this is one of those times where I won't necessarily be completely tied to the model. I like um, I like what I saw from him with my eyes. He's a 46% ground ball rate currently as well. He's gone away from being almost exclusively a ground ball guy that he's done in the past, and he's added quite a few strikeouts. So his strikeout rate has gone from in 2020 it was 23%, 23.2, 21 it was 22.4, and this year he has a 25.6 strikeout rate, but only a 6.5% walk rate. So he's added a lot of command, and his K minus BB this year is 19.1%. So my mind, that is that plus the park plus a good defense behind him means a starter who's worth rostering in a 16-team league such as ours. Michael Busch, I like as a prospect, but I know Fastballs wasn't planning on keeping him. I think, he's a potential 20 home run middle infield bat for the Dodgers, but who knows when he'll play. And then Diego Castillo was hurt. The pitcher was hurt, and so he ended up being in that trade as well. As far as getting Elijah Green back, and a smart move on Fastball's part, because he's not planning on keeping any of those three, and he got a potential keeper in return and a potential superstar in return. So for him, it was quantity for quality. And Chico got a piece in Singer and potentially a piece in Castillo that will be able to help him down the stretch as a playoff contender. Sam Moll and Harold Ramirez were throw-ins for me. A trade worth talking about, not the most exciting trade in the world, but I will stand by the fact that I think Singer is a better pitcher than he's, I think, universally being given credit for currently. Anything else on the trade?
Mm-mm.
All right, here's an interesting one, in my opinion. Let's see, I'll go up for it. Central Coast Huskies traded two loaded bowlers, Tony Gonsolin in a round 7 for Max Fried and a round 4. According to this trade in our league, Tony Gonsolin was worth more than currently than Max Fried was, given the picks that went back and returned. What was your initial reaction to this trade?
I think this is an interesting keeper league trade. As you mentioned, the team that received Gonsolin is in contention. He's in position to make the playoffs. Gonsolin is having a really good year. However, with the keeper aspect rolled in, I prefer Fried of the two pitchers. But I get both sides. I think it was a good move on the team that moved Gonsolin. I think they're selling high, and he got a nice little 3-round upgrade, and he got a really good pitcher to backfill Gonsolin. So I applaud the trade. I like that the team that acquired Gonsolin is looking to push the envelope and try to get more strikeouts, more wins, and giving up the lower ceiling type pitcher. But over the long term, I like the team that gave up Gonsolin to get Fried, because I think Fried, if I was investing in a multi-year keeper, I prefer Fried.
Mm-hmm.
But I get both sides.
I was surprised because I think, in my mind, when I look at those two pitchers, I immediately assume Fried is a much higher value pitcher, better pedigree. Again, a player that I think I just immediately think as a much higher rated pitcher. Obviously, that requires digging in a little bit more into what they've done this year, statistics and whatnot. Gonsolin, a couple of things that stood out to me with Gonsolin was, his ERA is 2.12, but his xFIP is 3.72. So usually that pretends to a little bit of luck. His left on base percentage was 84.6%. So he ran a really high left on base percentage, meaning, he has probably, part of that is the ability to strand runners with strikeouts, but part of that also is usually luck when it runs that high. And his batting average of balls in play is 201 this year. So some of the surface stats may be inflated a little bit versus reality based on those things when I look at first glance. But he is 15-1 this year, and victory and wins and losses are a part of our league, right? So as two different categories. So being a good pitcher on the Dodgers means quite a bit in our league. Uh, Scary part with him is, last year in total, he threw 68 and a third innings. In 2020, he threw 46 and two thirds innings. And in 19, he threw 81 and the third innings. So 18 was the last year he threw over 100 innings, and he's already at 123-1. So even though we only have like a quarter of the season left, I think there is still injury risk given where he is. He's kind of in a danger zone for him at this point. The other numbers are pretty good. 17% K minus BB. Nothing really too crazy. Average exit velocity is pretty normal. It's 88. Let's see, 88.8. And then his swinging strike is 12.1% and his CSW 28.8. So, to me, I see a pitcher who is a quality pitcher, but hasn't or has had quite a run of pretty good luck as well. I know he's learned how to throw his splitter in the zone this year, which has really helped him quite a bit. And he is a Dodger, and he's 15-1, so you can't knock that. Fried, on the other hand, has had also a very good season. Now, his results are much closer to, I think, his actual pitching. At first glance, 2.60 ERA, 3.08 xFIP, same ground ball rate as normal, just slightly above 50%. Left on base percentage, 75.9%. BABIP of 294, which is a little high, but is something that you would expect from a ground ball pitcher. He's 11-4. His K minus BB is 18.6%. Only a 5.2% walk rate. 51.1% ground ball rate, which is he's a pretty extreme ground ball pitcher. The other interesting thing is he's thrown fewer fastballs and fewer curveballs by about 5% with each pitch, and added almost 11% into his changeup. So he's throwing his changeup quite a bit more than he ever has. He's also throwing harder than he ever has this year at 94.1 miles an hour average fastball velocity. Last thing is swinging strike rate is highest that it's been since 18 for him, 11.6%. Not a ton of deception. It's 27.4% CSW. But his O swing is much higher than it's ever been as well. So full context, you're getting on both sides, you're getting a pitcher who pitches for a playoff contender. I think the wins will continue with both. Both have a pretty decent K minus BB. They get there in different ways. But if it was a long-term bet, as you said, Max Fried to me is the play because of the number of innings he's thrown over the last couple of years. And he's a horse. And I like that ground ball strikeout mix. Whereas Gonsolin has discovered some things this year, has had some arm trouble. It's a gamble. And I guess overall it's a gamble I may not have taken because the difference between Gonsolin and Fried is not enough for me to give up that long-term future with Fried. If Gonsolin was much more dominant this year and you expected that continue, I might be able to justify it. But you can also just love a pitcher a little more. And I think that was the case with loaded bowlers. Anything else on this trade?
I think it's impressive. I mean, I think Fried is a victim of living in a pitching ninja age. And the reality is he has a 3-year track record of limiting hard contact. And to me, that's you do that for that many years. It's luck is no longer, that's a demonstrated skill. He has 4 pitches that have better than league average vertical movement. And that's what keeps it off the barrel. And so his mix, as you said, his ground ball rate, his depth of his arsenal, and the man, he just competes. If you watch him, he just competes. He's a big game pitcher, and I've just become really fond of him. I regret ever trading him, honestly.
Max Fried?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think the other thing this year is I haven't looked it up. I'm going to right now, but I believe he's striking out more hitters this year than he has in the past.
He's at 23%, which is good for sure. especially
I
when you
guess
walk into
that's the
424.
same as similar to last year. The difference is there's a lot more command this year. It looks like
Yeah.
lower walk
And
rate.
there's an adage of sell high, and I think it has merit, but the hard part of that sometimes in retrospect is they weren't as high as they were going to get yet.
Right.
You could have sold higher.
Right. Well, and in this particular trade, I don't think Gonsolin is trading high. I think Gonsolin is kind of a at best a lateral move. But again, that's just me. Let's move on to another trade. So you traded, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this. You traded Walker Buehler in a round 14, which is essentially a pick at the bottom of the draft. It's your 29th player. To Lux Laster for you acquired Chris Bassett in a round 5. Walk me through your thought process on that trade and kind of how that happened.
Sure. So I was offering Walker Buehler to teams that had an eye on 2023, given his standing as the last 3 years as a top 10 to 15, if not top 5 starting pitcher, as you said, pitching on the Dodgers. So a team that was looking towards 2023 to acquire a mid to back end rotation piece to buoy my starting pitching staff, and hoping to get just a mid-round upgrade to sort of compensate for that step back of the ceiling of Bueller to someone who's more in the mid-range.
Mm-hmm.
Had pretty much this trade happened within the last couple hours of our deadline. Had pretty much given up on it happening. There wasn't a lot of interest in Bueller. However, I got a message from the owner I talked to earlier in the day, and I said I've been thinking about it, and I'm be interested to hear who would want back. And he offered the initial offer was a Wainwright, which I said I wouldn't be willing to do just because there was enough strikeouts. So we landed on Bassett and a 5 for compensation. I'm pleased. I mean, to me, Bassett is a 34-year-old Walker Buehler. Walker will be 29 going into his year, so he's 5 years older. So, I'm giving up, those peak years for the opportunity to try to have someone who I think could contribute in 2022. So it's taking a mid-round pick to try to alleviate some of that value. But they both have. When I say that he's a 34-year-old Walker Buehler, I say that because he competes. He has a deep mix. He throws a lot of pitches, and like I said, he competes. So I think they're cut from a similar mold.
It's interesting. I think that finding the owner that still values Bueller in that way and is the way that we see elbow surgery now is different than it was 10 years ago, right? Because a pitcher with elbow troubles was kind of a stay away 10 years ago. And I think this trade demonstrates that the assumption is that players come back darn near 100%. Quite honestly, I would have expected the picks to be reversed, in my opinion. I think that Bassett has proven to be very consistently a very good pitcher and is on a winning team. And I think that there's, given the question about when Buehler will be back, could be at the end of 23 even. If he has any sort of complications, I think that my opinion is that the picks maybe should have been reversed. Not enough to get upset about it, but I do think that your side of the trade was the better side. The only other interesting thing is that Bassett has changed the way he's pitched a little bit since pitching in New York. His ground ball rate is up to 49%. Last year in Oakland, it was 41.8. That might be conscious because Oakland is such a large park that he's tried to go to be a little more ground ball pitcher to not surrender home runs. I don't know that for a fact. I haven't looked at heat maps to see where location wise. K minus BB 17.6%, kind of in the range of acceptable for us. And then the only other interesting thing I found with Bassett is that he's changed his pitch mix quite a bit this year as well. Fewer fastballs, almost 10% more sliders than last year, and the slider velocity is it's interesting. So in 21, he had a pitch that was registering as a slider, but he was only throwing it 75.4 miles an hour. So my guess is, I haven't looked at the movement. My guess is there's probably more horizontal movement to that pitch. But this year he's throwing at 17.3% and it's increased velocity 2.9 miles an hour. The only other big change is he's throwing his really slow curveball about twice as much, which is kind of a fun pitch to watch. Don't have a lot more on him. His swinging strike rate is higher than it's ever been at 10.9%, and his CSW is higher than it's ever been at 29.9%. So, fantasy wise, you acquired a really nice, I think, middle rotation starter moving forward who's going to get wins. Might not get a ton of strikeouts, but is going to get you wins and keep his ERA pretty suppressed. I think it's a really nice trade on your part. I know you gave up Walker Buehler, who's a pitcher that you really appreciate, but was going to require probably close to a year in waiting in order to get him back at full capacity. So nice trade by you. We'll take a quick break and then we'll come back with two doozies of trades and then move on to our prospect deep dive. Sound good?
Okay.
Cool. So we've got two, I think, bigger, higher profile trades to discuss. The first one was Beer traded Luis Robert to fastballs for O'Neill Cruz and Miguel Vargas. Thoughts on that trade? I've got some background on that one too. This is kind of fun.
I don't know. I don't really know what to think about O'Neill Cruz being moved right now. He's and Luis Roberts hurt and he's had an up and down year. I mean, both players have a tremendous ceiling. I guess I would prefer the shortstop. I think outfield in our league format is easier to fill. However, with a player of the ceiling like Robert, that's hard to find. So I'll defer to you.
So I think or team context is also important in this trade. The team that traded O'Neill Cruz is building for the future, and at that particular point in time, also rostered Bobby Witt, Anthony Volpe, Marco Luciano, and I believe one other young shortstop. So I think the shortstop value for Cruz wasn't there for him. And in conversations with him, I think the assumption is that he believes Cruz ends up in the outfield eventually full time. So in a dynasty format, you're believing Cruz is going to be a power hitting outfield, and that's who you're giving up. I know that for him, Miguel Vargas is not necessarily going to be a frontline player in his mind. And so and that there are more Miguel Vargases to come in the upcoming years. So it wasn't a big sting. What's interesting is I did not see that particular manager valuing Robert highly in the past. And so I do wonder what it is that he saw in Robert. I think Robert is a made out of porcelain, but is a very talented player. I think he's twitched up to the point where he gets hurt all the time. He hasn't had so this year is his most plate appearances in a year at age 24, and it's 354 plate appearances. The tools are there, right? You're looking at I think a 25 type of player who might hit 300 as well. Very impressive player to say the least, but not one that I would be seeking out. I think that the conversations about him being a first round player in redraft that a lot were having heading into 22 I didn't believe in it. I'm not a believer that he's got the health or the focus to be healthy to be able to maximize his talent. If he does end up playing a full season, I don't think it's going to be back-to-back seasons, and I'll be surprised. The other thing about his profile that I don't love is he doesn't really take a walk. The last 2 years, his walk rate has been 4.7 and 4.2%. Those are players that I know there are examples of players with low walk rates that are very successful, but they're players that I tend to stay away from if possible. That said, I think Robert is a great player. I understand why one would trade for him. Cruz is essentially handing someone else a lottery ticket, but is a scary player to trade because there is very clearly 40 home run power in his bat, given his max exit velocities and some of the things he's shown. I don't know if he's going to run too much in the majors. He has 6 steals so far in 49 games. Um, I don't know if that will continue, especially if he does fill out anymore. So really, it's a power player for a very good hit tool. But I see it as outfielder for outfielder, and I don't think Vargas tips the scales one way or another as far as whether I would make this trade. For me, this trade is about Cruz and it's about Robert. Just my opinion. You got anything else to add on this trade?
My sense on the communication that was sent on the group thread was that Vargas was the tipping point for the owner that had Robert to let him go. So it's interesting.
But what's Vargas's ceiling for you? Like, what do you see him? What can he? What is his?
I'm not saying that he would have tipped it for me. I'm just saying it seemed like that was a piece that
Sure,
tipped it for the owner that was letting Robert go
sure.
based on what was posted.
I think Vargas um is a good player. He doesn't have the explosiveness I think that you look for in a star, right? Athletically speaking, I think he's not going to play second. I know he played some second base this year for the Dodgers. I think he's going to end up at third for them. I think he takes over for Turner. Um, and he does have the ability to hit 300, but I don't know if the power is there. And as I'll state later with my prospect that I'm going over, I don't know if like you have a player that doesn't have that kind of explosive max exit and doesn't have that twitch like a Vargas. Pitchers will exploit that and will throw will throw in the zone more because they're not as worried about giving up home runs with the player they don't believe can hit home runs. And Vargas obviously has hit home runs in the minor leagues, but I wonder if he an 18 home run bat or is he a 30 home run bat? If he's tipping the scales for you in a trade where you're giving up Luis Robert, you think he's a 30 home run bat. Personally, I don't know if he is or not. But an interesting trade. I don't know if I side one way or another, but a very, very interesting trade and one that was made pretty much at the last minute. So moving to the last trade, the background that I was speaking of with this Robert trade was that there was a 3-way trade that was in the works and basically ready for approval that included myself, the O'Neill Cruz owner, and Chico's bail bonds. And that trade was I was giving Fernando Tatis Jr. 2 fastballs. Fastballs was giving me O'Neill Cruz and 2 other prospects, Hassel and Edward Cabrera. I believe that's what it was. And I was going to trade Cruz to Chico's bail bonds for Framber Valdez and I always want to say Octavio Dotel, but it's Camilo Doval. It's so funny. I always want to say that. He was one of my favorite pitchers. There were lots of picks involved too. I was going to acquire, I think 4 or 5 pick upgrades, something like that in the deal. So I would have ended up with Hassel, Cabrera, Framber Valdez, Camilo Doval, and a bunch of picks for Tatis. Chico would have ended up with Cruz, and obviously fastballs would have ended up with Tatis. And I was waiting to make the trade, and I had told both managers, "Hey, I got the trade teed up. I'll send it if you guys are ready for it." I was asking for more picks in that conversation, and then nothing. I knew that we all knew that Fastballs was at a concert. He was drinking wine, having a good time. And then all of a sudden, the Robert trade for O'Neill Cruz and Vargas comes over the wire. And I'm like, holy shit. He just like basically pulled the rug out from underneath this huge 3-way trade. And I wasn't pissed. I know this is how it goes, but I was certainly disappointed because I was excited about the trade. Particularly about getting that level of pitching back in return along with prospects. So Chico and I started laughing. Chico was obviously really disappointed to lose out on Cruz because Cruz was a player he really wanted to acquire. Um, so that's the background, that there was this three-way trade that I was like all ready to push send on. And then all of a sudden you see one of the players involved in that trade go to a different team. So trade line drama or trade deadline drama there. What ends up happening is literally in the last minute of the deadline, I traded away Fernando Tatis Jr. and three late round picks to fastballs for Robert Hassel, Marco Luciano, Anthony Volpe, Edward Cabrera, and 3 round 5s. Um, one maybe the biggest trade I've been involved in fantasy baseball, in my time in fantasy baseball. Definitely one that gave me pause. The way it came about is that fastballs in like one of the last minutes said, just send me a Tatis trade. So I sent him one that I didn't think that he would accept. And it was one of those where you don't know if in the moment if you really wanted him to accept. And then he accepted, I think caught up in the moment to a certain extent. And so it is what it is. In hindsight, as I dug more, um, I'll give some of my perspective real quickly. The one thing that it did to my team um that was probably a negative is it took away some of my flexibility down the stretch, as far as competing this year. One of the fallouts was that I ended up cutting Ricky Tiedemann to pick up a hitter over the last couple of days. That was a product of this particular trade. But all in all, I was super excited to acquire. Hassel and Luciano are top 10 prospects heading into 23. Luciano will end up at third, but and then Anthony Volpe is also. I acquired 3 top 10 hitting prospects, plus Cabrera kind of put the trade over the top for me because I think he's proving to be, even if he's just a 5 inning pitcher, he's proving to be a pretty dominant pitcher down the stretch with a ton of strikeouts for the Marlins. And then I also acquired 3 pick upgrades coming up in this 23 draft. So it was painful to give up Tatis. Getting Volpe and Cabrera were the keys for me in this trade. I think Volpe falls right in line with the types of players that you and I both philosophically try to roster, which are players with both speed and power. If he ends up being the player that we think he can be, I think that he's going to be a top 5 shortstop. Cabrera helps me this year. I couldn't make this trade and not get something back that helps me this year. The other part is I wonder, when I was looking at Tatis, I dug a little bit more into Tatis heading into the deadline and his previous stats. And obviously, like I've said, I think he's the only player that has legitimate 50-50 potential as far as skill. But I wonder if he continues to run because of his propensity to get hurt, right? One of the first things that goes away is with the player who gets hurt all the time is the teams will tell them not to run. And that's a lesson that I've learned with Buxton this year is Byron Buxton isn't running on the base paths, which has changed his value. Now he's increased his power, which I really love, but he's become just a power player and not a power speed player. If Tatis becomes strictly a power player, he does have a ton of swing and miss, even though he hits a ton of home runs. Is he the Tatis that we see right now, or is he more of a strict power player? The other part with Tatis is there's real possibility that he is a full-time outfielder moving forward to keep him healthy, keep his bat in the lineup. And if that's the case, then what does that do for his value? I still believe he's a top 5, top 10 player in fantasy, but he's not a shortstop anymore. And to me, his value looks a little bit different. So I love him. I rostered him since the inception of this league. I will miss him on my team. It's not the type, I don't like making the trades typically that gives up the one superstar for a bunch of other players, but I believe enough in the players that I acquired. And I was frustrated enough with Tatis that this was a trade that, in hindsight, I'm even happier with the trade for my team than I was when I first made the trade.
Good for you. Takes a lot of courage to do something like that.
What was your reaction when you saw it? I know that you said something in the group thread that was like, what's going on, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think I did. I think I was just taken aback by the number of players involved at this such a last minute. I think that's why the root of my comment.
Sure. That was the one of the scary parts was to make a trade of that magnitude at the last minute because there was a bit of, I think, compulsiveness on, I know certainly on fastball side, and on my side too. There was just in the particular players that I received. I knew the players involved well enough to to feel comfortable trading for them, but I wasn't diving deep into them as of yesterday, sort of thing, right? It was. I know these players are good. I know more than the typical manager about them, but I don't know as much as I would typically want to know in acquiring them. So yeah, super fun trade. An example of the type of trade that happens in a league where you have managers that are highly participatory and willing to engage in a real trade deadline. I believe all the trades that we talked about today were trades that happened on deadline day. Um, so you had a lot of star power moving from team to team, but really, really fun, really exciting. Uh, I love this league. I truly, truly, truly appreciate this league and all the managers in it. Um, so that is our trade deadline. Do you have any other trades you'd like to cover or any other comments about the deadline?
I don't. I would echo what you said. It was fun anticipating. I tried to stoke the fire with some posts and putting intel out there. It was we had a couple trades during the week, but yeah, deadline day was definitely fun, and it was even though I only made two trades and they both came together at the last minute, came to the point where I didn't think anything was going to come together, and I was okay with that. I ended up making a couple, but it was fun to just see the engagement and trades throughout the league.
Sure. Yeah, there's some real kind of shifting of, I wouldn't say shifting of power, but some real big names that moved and some gambles out there during this deadline. Super fun. Super fun. So thanks, guys. Prospect deep dive. We're each going to do a prospect. You want to go ahead and start us off?
Sure. So I looked at some hitters. I'm looking at strikeout and walk rate, and honestly, just generated a pretty uninspiring list of players. And I wrote down in my notebook for the off season, and one of the ideas is to try to determine like what does the development curve look like for players who have those plate skills, but also hit for power in the majors. What does their minor league track record look like? Because when you search for those skills in the minors, you get very boring, guys who are too old for the level, that kind of thing. So you can't search for the skills that you are seeking in the minors. So I have to go backwards and understand that progression and see again players right now who have those skills. What did it look like for them or then they were at that level to try to get a better idea. So that being said, I pivoted to pitchers. I looked at our favorite stat, strikeout minus walks, did a quick filter. And two players popped in the top 10 who were recently acquired by the Oakland A's. So I wanted to talk a little bit about them. And that's JP Sears, who ranked second. His K minus BB this year is 29.4. And Kowalczyk, who ranked 10th on the list at 24.8%. So both of these are left-handed pitchers. They both came from the Yankees system. I was pulling up going into the season. Fangraphs had JP Sears is the 25th prospect in the Yankee system and Waldichuk at 15. Um, you know, Waldichuk has not been up, so I wanted to focus on Sears today. I did watch some video on Waldichuk. I was a little surprised at his strikeout rate. He does have a little bit of deception, I think. He turns his back to the hitters with a left-handed delivery, kind of a three-quarter slot. I saw a lot of pitches that were in the zone that players just seemed hesitant to swing at. So I don't know if they just don't see him well. His velocity isn't top end, but he has two good breaking pitches. Fangraphs count him to Reed Detmers. I wouldn't necessarily, I'm not making that comp because I haven't studied him enough, but that was sort of a pitcher that they compared him to. He didn't look as big to me as Detmer says, which is, I think, that's something to me I look at if you're looking for a big starter, as does he have the size to go 160, 180 innings and hold up? But looking at Sears, he's performed well so far this year, and he pitched this past week. I took a close look at that start. He went pitched 5 innings, 76 pitches, had 8 swinging strikes. He's throwing his four seam a high percentage of the time, but gets very low swings and miss on it. However, his slider, this particular start, he got 50% whiff rate on his slider on throwing it 22 times. He did give up quite a bit of hard contact, but he's continued so far to limit the damage in terms of ERA. His stuff plus is very mediocre, which is not surprising given his velocity, and he only has 3 pitches right now. I have him at 82-1, which is concerning. Full transparency, I was thinking about picking up JP Sears prior to the trade that we talked about. The thing that gave me pause was his stuff plus and the fact that he plays on the A's. I was also pursuing Jordan Montgomery, which I think is an interesting tie-in because the reason I was interested in Montgomery is he's a left-hand starter who now plays on the Cardinals, who has a great defense behind him, has a ground ball lean, doesn't walk people, doesn't have elite swing and miss, which Sears and Waldichuk kind of fit that A's profile. They tend to acquire pitchers who have a deeper mix, who have command, but not necessarily velocity and stuff. And they teach them how to get the most out of their arsenal. And that's kind of the model that they've used to get guys like Cole Irvin and Paul Blackburn, and James Kaprielian this year has had some good starts. They're able to get quality innings out of these sort of middle range pitchers. And so I was thinking about my pursuit of Montgomery, and I think there is a place in a 16-team league for these types of pitchers, like Jordan Montgomery specifically. Now, I'm not saying Waldichuk and the Series will get to that level, but I think they have the potential to. Good command, left-handed starters who can maximize their pitch mix, use their defense, use their ballpark. Again, we're not going to, most of us are not going to have 6 or 7 aces. So, I was really pursuing Montgomery. And again, I think these pitchers are of that ilk potentially down the road. As someone who pitches 5 or 6 innings, doesn't walk people, gives up 2 or 3 earned runs, pitches to his defense, you need guys like that to round out your staff. So yeah, I'm encouraged by what I've seen from Sears. I had a little bit of just buyer's regret I didn't go after him after this start this week. But we'll see how he does when teams get a second look at him. Given he's throwing his fastball that much, he's giving up quite a bit of hard contact. But once I got Bassett, I didn't feel that it was warranted to go after him, but I was considering him.
Nice. So couple of thoughts and a question for you. I do agree that there is a place for like the Montgomery, Sears, Waldichuk types in a 16-team league. I do also think that cutoff is probably 16-team leagues. Would you roster any of those in a 12?
Probably not.
Okay, just to make that distinction. I do want to ask a question. We can table it if we don't have time to have it, but I'm very interested in your observation around what stats and what how to look for or seek players, minor league hitters with specific skills, right? Because what I'm finding in my own kind of minor league observations are that scouting is more important to me than ever, like visual scouting and tools. And as someone who loves numbers and would get in really knockdown, drag out arguments with others 15, 20 years ago about the use of numbers in baseball versus scouting, it's interesting that I think that the pendulum in Major League Baseball as a whole has swung so far towards numbers that I think that we really truly undervalue scouting, and I feel like I see that play out a ton. And so when I'm looking at minor leaguers, right, there's a baseline of numbers that you want to see, but I think we're so reactive to a lot of those numbers that we're overlooking skill and we're overlooking who that player actually is. I think of the first one that comes to mind for me is Noel V. Marte, right? There were a lot of, specifically James Anderson, but there were a lot of prospect hounds that were really kind of lowering Marte, questioning his body type, questioning his focus, questioning his desire, and subsequently were ranked him a lot lower at the beginning of this year or after a month into the year than they had previously. And we've talked about this on the pod before. I went and saw him play, and I just saw a disinterested player who wanted to be in a different league, but he was clearly the best player on the field. I don't know where the body questions come from, because he looked like he was one of the few players on that field that looked like a true major leaguer in the way that he was built. And you watch his swing, he's a powerful player. And that kind of set of tools, on a 20-year-old who has the potential to stick in the middle of the diamond, like, I'm sorry, but that's a top 10 prospect for me. And regardless of whether his numbers said so after a month or two in minor league ball this year. So there's a human element to prospects that I think is really undervalued. So for me, one of the things I'll do in this offseason is, yes, look at numbers, try to get a baseline of what we're looking for, but then just start watching video. And I think that there are enough people out there who put video together of player swings and slow that swing down to the point that we can start to really learn what to look for. So to me, that segues to I did two players. I'll probably just talk about one. Okay. I did both Robert Hassel and Marco Luciano because they're two top 10 prospects that I acquired at the deadline and I wanted to know more about. And do you have do you want me to do one over the other? Is there one that you'd like to?
I prefer to hear about Hassel.
Cool. So Hassel is an example of a player who, the comps have been, everyone's saying Christian Yelich, right? Christian Yelich of a couple years ago. He's great hit tool, questionable power, left-handed, has some speed. And I looked at him and I watched a bunch of film on both Hassel and Luciano. What I found with Hassel was he hits in what I see as a pretty unconventional manner, right? He slows his bat down quite a bit to hit the ball opposite field to left field. He kind of really has to leverage himself to hit for power, pull power. I see why there's this perception of a lack of game power with him. And people talk a lot about his ability to steal 20 bases in a year. I don't see any explosiveness in him athletically. What I see is a player who's able to process the pitch that's coming quicker than, like a split second quicker than your average major leaguer, which allows him to decide. And then he has the hand-eye coordination to either flip the ball into left field or to swing at full capacity and try to hit a home run. So but this isn't something that we talk about, I think, when we talk about him as a prospect. Background on Hassel, 6'2", 195, just turned 21. He was drafted 8th overall by the Padres in 2020 out of Franklin, Tennessee. He was one of the headliners in the deal for Juan Soto, as we know, along with C.J. Abrams, Luke Voigt, Mackenzie Gore, and James Wood, and Harleen Susana. Currently, Pipeline has him as their number 23 overall prospect, number 4 outfielder, number 1 in the Nationals organization. Baseball Prospectus had him as the 13th overall prospect and the number 8 dynasty prospect as of August. And then RotoWire has him as number 5 overall. So MLB Pipeline had him lowest. They also tend to be the least fantasy friendly prospect rankings. So he's a little bit higher fantasy than he is real life. Fangraphs had his hit tools 55, game power 50, raw power 50, speed 55, field 50, and future value 50. Pipeline had a 60 hit, 50 power, 55 run, and then 55 arm, field, and overall. This year, his triple slash in high A and now double A, it's 289, 371, 442. It's good for 813 OPS and 342 at bats. 20 doubles, 1 triple, 20 homers, 58 RBIs, 23 steals, 11.3% walk rate, 19.9% K rate, and a ground ball rate in the mid 50s. Which I think that particular part of it is where some of the Yelich comp comes from. I actually see some of Jared Kelenic in him, in that I think both Kelenic and Hassel are trying to maximize what physicality they have. You see Kelenic kind of, he's a stronger dude. He's more put together than Hassel is at this point, but you see them try to muscle up a bit. And that's where some of that comp for me came from. The other one is that we were told Kelenic had speed coming up as a prospect. And the reality is, if you watch him play for the Mariners and now in AAA, he's average. He's not fast. And I found that interesting because that's what I saw from Hassel as well. The thing that gives me confidence in Hassel as a player is his bat to ball skills. His hit tool, I think, is better than 60. I think his ability to flip the ball into left field is going to prove huge, especially if we do away with shifts. He can put the ball where he wants to put it. I could see him as an even higher hit tool, but less power, maybe 15 home runs. And from the little that I watched of him, about 20 minutes or so of film, I saw a very, I hate to use this word, but an instinctual player who is going to be able to continue to steal bases without being very fast. In my scouting notes, I said I see a future batting champion. I think that there is that potential. The one fear, it's the same fear that I talked about earlier with Hassel, is that if he doesn't prove that he can hit the ball out of the park consistently, I could see him getting challenged with a lot of fastballs and a lot of strikes. And so at that point, I don't know that his value is what we want it to be. So that was Robert Hassel. Do you have any questions on Hassel? I'm gonna step away for literally 5 seconds. Any questions on Hassel?
No, I was just trying to pull up his see if he'd been caught stealing this year, but it's only showing me 4 games at Harrisburg. So I know he's played more than that. I don't know why it's not showing me more. No, I don't have any questions.
I think he's in my opinion, I could see him. So he's been caught 3 times this year. So he has 23 steals and 3 caught.
Yeah, it's really good.
He's a fun player to watch. He's one of those players that from a stereotype standpoint, I would expect him to be a St. Louis Cardinal, right? He's just because he's like positioned in the right place in the outfield. He does the right thing. When he steals second, it's off of a really great jump. He hits he gets a breaking ball on the outside part of the plate and he flips the ball into left field as a left-handed hitter. He gets an inside fastball. He's quick enough to be able to turn on it and leverage his swing to hit it out. I think that what the scouts have said about his ceiling being a little bit lower than your typical high-end prospect, I think that's true, but he is good enough that we could see him as a low-end outfield 1 in fantasy. Maybe even in a 16-team league like ours, I could see him as maybe a mid-range outfield 1 at his peak. And I do think that the floor is a high-end outfield 2. I do think he's going to hit well. The other thing that's interesting about him is I could see him being a higher OPS player than we expect with a lot more extra base hits, right? The fact that he can put the ball where he wants to and he's got that kind of back control, I can see him being a gap-to-gap type of guy that has a 850 OPS or even a 900 OPS, not because he's hitting home runs, but because he has 40 doubles and 10 triples and 15 home runs as opposed to just strictly 40 home runs. What I wrote is his peak could be 320, 400, 500 triple slash with 25 home runs and 15 steals. That's his absolute peak in my opinion. But a player that I love, a player that I would consider trading an outfielder in order to make a place for him on my team, and a player who I think, especially in the current iteration of the Nationals, you're looking at a guy who's going to hit in the top third of the lineup for the next 10 years.
Sweet.
A lot of fun for me to kind of spend a half hour, 45 minutes on a prospect and really dig deep and see what I find. Quirky player to say the least, but a lot of fun. I'll save the Luciano prospect deep dive for another time here.
Okay,
Let's cover the weekend series that we're excited about, or weekend games, and then we'll take a quick break and come back with open forum and cards.
sure.
So weekend
Yeah.
series or pitching matchups you're looking forward to.
Yeah, so for me, just a tiny day tomorrow in Detroit. I believe it's his first two start week and ever as a starting pitcher because they've
Hmm.
always used 6-man rotation. So he pitched Monday, he's pitching again tomorrow. I've triple checked it like 3 times, expecting him to be pushed for some
Right,
reason, just because he's never done it. But I mean, it's still 6 days in between. It just happened to land that way. So
right.
yeah, that'll be my game, my highlight.
Awesome. So we've got what I have down is I'm interested in the David Peterson Zach Wheeler matchup. I think that Peterson has flown under the radar a bit, but has been pretty effective. And then Phillies Mets obviously NL East competing for playoff position. Christian Javier against Spencer Strider, just a ton of strikeouts. As a Strider owner, I'm a little bit, I do get a little nervous that someone like the Astros may have figured him out. And then, of course, he comes out and strikes out 12. So who knows what's going to happen with that. But a really fun pitching matchup for those that like those high strikeout pitchers. And then it also is the return of Dustin May against the Marlins tonight as well. And then tomorrow, Dylan Cease against Aaron Savali. Savali has pitched well recently. It's interesting. And then Cease obviously is just a fun one to watch. We've got Alek Manoah and the Blue Jays against Nestor Cortez and the Yankees, obviously AL East, two pitchers that have performed well this year. And then if you like hard throwers, you got Sandy Alcantara against Ryan Pepio, and Alcantara against the Dodgers. So what is probably the Cy Young winner in the National League against the best offense in the game should be a really fun matchup to watch as well. So some fun pitching matchups, I think, for the upcoming 2 days. Should be a lot of fun. I'm going to be sad when we can't cover these weekend series anymore in the pod in the off season for sure. So we'll take a quick break and come back with open forum and open some cards.
As much as I'd love to stay here and talk, I have to lift tonight, and I'm just
Yeah, we're good. Open forum question. What you got?
I have multiple choice for you.
Oh,
Out of two, they're similar. You can answer the one that suits you better.
mm-hmm.
So my first one was going to be: do you have a writer that you really enjoy who writes about baseball?
Mm-hmm.
And the second one was going to be, or is, if you could only watch, read, consume one baseball thing a day, and it wasn't the Mariners game, you have to eliminate that because I know that's the default answer. But if you could
Right.
only invest time into one other thing, like what is like your go-to, um, source for baseball content? I give you the background of my question is I've been trying to figure out some like written form for like game recaps or game summaries. I've been trying to do the condensed games, just not really giving me what I want. It's
Sure.
taking too much of my time.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm still trying to formulate how to stay in touch with all my teams, the entire league in a time efficient manner. And so I was curious, so multiple choice, which question you feel like answering?
Um, I'll answer the second one. I think the first one, uh, there's so many writers that have produced really great. I'm looking at my bookcase right now. Really great baseball books. I don't think of one off the top of my head, necessarily. With regards to your question about kind of, excuse me, consumption of baseball over the course of the day, I think this isn't quite answering your question, but in the day and age of smartphones, I think I just have a routine that I subconsciously follow each day that allows me to consume over the course of the day everything that I need to know. And then if I have, downtime, then I can sit down and watch games in their entirety. Um, I go just so I've got, MLB trade rumors um, notifications on my phone. It's one of the few apps that I allow notifications from. So I can see if there's something of interest that pops up, I can certainly open that up right away. Um, I in my morning routine, as far as having coffee and sitting down, I'm always on ESPN, CBS, The Athletic, um, RotoWire, BP. Just a quick overview. It's not, I don't read every last article, but I check to see if there's anything that pertains to my team or is of interest to me. Um, and then as far as, I work in the afternoon and evening. And so I have the morning to watch things if I want to go back and watch. And then um, I don't watch a lot of games live. That's where kind of the weekends are reserved to be able to do that. And then, as you said, I'll watch condensed games. The goal is to watch all the condensed games each day, but at minimum, it's watch the Mariners condensed game. But I don't have any real answer as far as having one source. Unfortunately, because we're in such a different world now, I don't know that there's one place to go to read recaps. And then even if we do read the recap, there's not the uh, the statistics that are cited, and the way in which the recap is written is not comprehensive enough, I don't think, for the type of consumption um, that we do, right? So the only other thing is just constantly on the fantrax site, because I think fantrax does a really good job of, I think they're just directly linked to RotoWire. And so they bring up the RotoWire updates on
They are.
any of your
I've
players.
noticed that.
Yeah,
Yeah, as I've tried different news services, I've noticed like that wording looks really familiar.
right,
Oh, they're feeding into like if you
right.
go to like MLB on RotoWire, the latest news, and
Hmm.
you click on it
It's
and go to
direct,
that
right,
player in Fantrax, it's word for word.
right. So
It's
I
pretty
don't
cool.
really, I think it's more about how to fit in. I'd say this for you too. It's been effective for me. I fit in little snippets um of information intake over the course of my day that fits with, work and family and all the other stuff. And then but I don't have a real big block of time other than late at night to sit down and dedicate, and then weekends to sit down and dedicate to consumption. Again, I think fantrax does a great job. I enjoy I guess melding the two together. Some of the deeper dive articles in the Athletic, I really appreciate. I think they do the best job as far as what the bookmarks that I have. They do the best job of digging deep into Major League Baseball, and then um, I think BP gives a good blurb and update about minor leaguers. I tend to read Baseball Prospectus the most as far as minor league ball goes. Um, I don't think that helps, but that's kind of the answer on my end. I threw a bunch of stuff up at the wall there. Um, I wish there was a more in-depth version of like the Seattle Times, right, where you could go in and read a little bit about each game and get that update. Uh, or it sounds like you're looking for like a 3-minute condensed game instead of an 8-minute condensed game,
Seems like there's a gap. Maybe a couple guys can fill it.
right? Go hire an editor and put something together. Um,
A lot of people that are in the industry, that's how they started. They just started creating stuff every day and putting it out there, and as
right,
people started to find value in it. And
right. Do you have anything to add to your own question there?
I don't, from a writing perspective, I don't have a writer, but I would echo. I was knowing that you often ask me what is my answer. I enjoy the athletic staff and the way that they have a dedicated writer to each team.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think there are 5 or 6 markets that they have someone on the athletic staff write for it because it's a smaller market. But be
Right.
that as it may, Fabian Ardaya for the Dodgers, Will Salmon, C. Trent Rosecrans, Cody Stovenhagen, like they write for specific teams, and I'm leaving a lot of really good ones out. Those are the ones that come to mind. But
Sure.
I value their writing and their connection to the team. I just think they do a really nice job. It's not just stroking the ego of the owners. They
Right.
not afraid to point out flaws. Um, Grant Brisbee for the Giants, he's been very critical of the moves or lack of moves they've made this year, just saying like, pointing out how average they've been. So I appreciate the honesty, but they also celebrate, when the team does well, when they dig deep, when there's a story on a minor leaguer or, things like I just think they do a really nice job.
Right.
So my hat's
So,
off to whoever started that concept for that site and what they do because I think it's really unique. That sort of long form, dedicated team writing is it's
right.
really great.
So I will add two things. I think that one, Giants specifically, the Giants have just overperformed. I don't think that the lack of move overperformed historically. I don't think the lack of moves is the reason why they're not good. I think that the fact that they've overperformed what they should have done um, the last couple of years is why they've been so good, right? They've been able to figure out on the margins how to get better without giving up too much of their assets or system. And this year, some of the moves happen to not work. So I think criticizing them for not making moves, I don't know if I agree with that. The other thing is along this topic is what I found specifically this year because you and I have invested so much time in this project, and I think more time in fantasy than we ever have, is that I don't follow any writers or any systems religiously anymore, right? I take what I can from various writers and various podcasters and us and kind of look critically at their work and decide which of their work I think is correct and incorporate that into my own opinions the way you would in school, right? But I don't rely upon any one source or any one writer um, as gospel. And I think that is something that I don't know that I ever really have, but I think that's changed even more this year. I think the more that you know and the more you learn, the more you really do start to build your own distinct opinion about certain statistics or about certain models or about certain players and why they're good. And that's been fun for me, that process of going from, kind of taking in different models and saying, okay, I really believe in that model or that writer. And so that's what I'm going to use to being like, you know what? I don't believe in this anymore. I don't think they're right. And I followed it closely enough that I just don't think it's right. I'm going to build my own, or I'm going to make my own opinion. So that's one really, really interesting thing if we're talking about sourcing and we're talking about um, consumption that as a fantasy player, I've really changed as far as how I view sources and their work. It's not to put their work down as much as it is. I just think I'm looking at it much more critically than I ever have, which is fun for me. That's very fun.
Yeah.
Cards. I have a pack. Did you bring one too?
Yeah, I can do a 1993 Bowman, courtesy of Chico, or I can do some more 22 Donruss, whatever we feel like doing.
I've got an 89 Donruss that I'll open, and then maybe you open your 22 pack, and then we'll call it good.
Okay,
Cool.
sounds good.
Let me take away. Of course, it always takes me 10 minutes to do this. There we go. This is a pack of Donruss. Got an old logo puzzle piece. I remember putting those together. Hey, Hindu. Can you read that or no?
I can't.
Dave Henderson.
Oh, nice.
Rest in peace. Old Mariners center fielder as well. Was also kind of a pillar of the North Seattle community for quite a long time. Really, really nice guy. Actually, was able to I've served him in bars a bit. He wasn't really a frequenter of it, but he was really social guy, awesome guy. Can you tell me? I can tell you off the top of my head. Can you tell me how many saves this guy had in his peak year? Bobby Thickpen.
Um, I'll go with 43.
All right, I believe it was 57, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. This was before he had the 57 save year, so we'll have to look it up. But Bobby Thickpen was a great closer. You remember his nickname? Steve Balboni.
Oh man, I don't.
Steve Bye Bye Balboni.
Bye bye.
Because he hit home runs. He was a horrible Mariners player. Andy Allenson, don't have anything really other than he was a backup catcher for the what was the Indians. Alex Madrid, who I think was like a B-level prospect, if I'm not mistaken. Eric King, Was supposed to be a decent prospect, but never really panned out. Ah, Blackjack McDowell, second year card. Ended up being a dominant pitcher for the Yankees for quite a long time. As of this card, he 159 innings and 88. He's a 5-10 record with a 3.97 ERA. I never really loved him, but maybe part of it was because of his Yankees time and such a Yankees hater. One of my faves, Ron Darling,
Ron Darling.
still prominent in baseball as an announcer. Underrated pitcher though for the Mets. Joe Baver, reliever for the Braves. Don't look at the logo; it's horrible.
Yeah, it is.
Dennis Martinez. He was very, very, very good for a long time. Good old Kevin McReynolds, right-handed power hitter, not a ton of power. Just kind of a third outfielder. Willie Frazier. That day's Jesse Chavez to a certain extent, bounced between starting and relieving. Jerry Don Gleaton, very much a loogie. Cecilio Guante, who looks like who was the guy in Major League that had Joe Boo? That's what he looks like to me.
I haven't seen that movie enough to have that recall, but I do that.
One of
Sean
my favorite
Dunston.
players of this
Yeah.
age, Sean Dunston, known more for his 100-mile-an-hour fastball that
Yes, and his arm.
eventually throw. Never the hitter that you expected him to become, but still a very, very good hitter or very, very good player for a long, long time. I like Sean Dunston a lot.
All right.
Thank you, Chico.
Yep. We decided on the Donruss, right? The 22 Donruss? Okay. All right.
Brandon Belt. I always want to like him, and I'm always disappointed, fantasy-wise. I can't see that. Oh, Lindor, nice. Man, he's been so good this year.
You know what his nickname is in his family?
I do not.
El Paco. Because in Spanish, Paquito means little.
Yeah.
And he's like the baby in his family, so they all call him Paco. I watched this documentary about him on ESPN Plus, and it was really
nice.
moving. Really, really moving. It made me respect and love that movie more.
Yadi Molina.
This is not a player that you like.
Cronenworth.
That's a cool looking card, though.
Mm-hmm.
The contrast and the photo.
Mm-hmm.
This is a player that you like. A little throwback.
Hey.
This one I don't understand. It's clearly Bryce Harper, but the name says Mondo. I don't know what that means.
Huh. Is it a nickname?
It says 1988 retro. Bryce Harper, one of the baseball's enduring stars. Harper was the respect and admiration of players from coast to coast. This is underscored when the Philadelphia Slugger was named outstanding player of the league and the Players' Choice Awards after 2021 season. Yeah, so I don't know what the Mondo is referring to.
Huh.
It's really odd. And then we have Matt Manning, he's back up in the major leagues.
Oh, rated rookie card though. I love those rated rookie cards.
And then we have this is pretty cool looking, Diamond Kings Jose Ramirez.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Have you ever rostered him in fantasy?
Ramirez?
Yes.
Not that I remember, no. If I did, it was a really, really long time ago. So Bryce Harper wore Mondo for Players Weekend.
Oh, okay. So it's a
in
reference to
18.
players. Okay.
It's an old family nickname. There's an
Well,
old family nickname. Everybody still calls me that my entire family.
Credit to you for your search engine skills. You pulled that really fast.
He credits his uncle for giving him the name, although he wasn't exactly sure why. When he was a child playing t-ball growing up with Chris Bryant, for whatever reason, the name has stayed with Harper through the years, and he'll get a chance to sport it. There we go. That's where the Mondo comes from. It's his old nickname from his family. All right, man. Anything else?
I'm good.
We're in the stretch run here. You and I are obviously facing off this week. Matchup ends Sunday. We've got what, two more matchups before the playoffs, I think.
I believe there's 3 weeks left in the regular season. I don't know how many matchups there are, if there's any double weeks. I have it in my notebook here. I can tell you definitively.
Pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, so we are in period 18, it ends on the 21st. There are 3 more periods, the
Mhm.
last period ending on September 11th.
Stretch run. Good luck, my friend.
Thank you, Tino. Be well.
You too. Talk soon.